it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin.
I think, like President Trump, I haven't looked all that deeply at Project 2025, but it seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
And so...
All right, let's get into it. What you're about to watch is a masterclass in how not to run a congressional hearing. We've got two separate clips featuring Ben Shapiro walking straight into what was supposed to be a hostile environment. Except it turns out the opposition wasn't nearly as prepared as they thought. On one side, you have members of Congress who clearly believed this was their moment. They thought they had finally cornered one of the most recognizable conservative voices in the country. Armed with pre-written talking points, academic jargon, and buzzwords straight out of a graduate seminar, they came in confident that this would be an easy takedown. The strategy was obvious from the start. Frame the conversation around identity politics, introduce terms like white privilege and Project 2025, and force Shapiro into either apologizing for his existence or stumbling over their definitions. The expectation was simple: pressure plus narrative equals submission. But here's the problem for them. Ben Shapiro actually prepares. He doesn't rely on slogans. He doesn't play along with ideological framing. And he certainly doesn't fall for rapid-fire political theater designed to generate sound bites rather than answers. As the hearing unfolds, you can see the shift happen in real time. The questions stop landing. The labels stop sticking. The attempts to moralize start collapsing under their own weight. What was supposed to be an interrogation quickly turns into an awkward display of overconfidence meeting hard logic. This is the moment where the performative outrage runs headfirst into someone who isn't interested in playing the game. Let's break it down.
Mr. Shapiro, you talked about white privilege, and just this week, I had a conversation with Rachel Lazar, who's done some work, a Jewish American woman who's done some work on this area, as well as having extensive conversations with Dr. Greg Parks of Wake Forest University, who's also talked quite a bit about critical race theory. And it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin. And I don't think that, and I think universities would be remiss to then say that because you're white, you're not allowed to say anything that's critical of white people. I didn't know that white privilege actually went into that sphere. My understanding is it's just, and the issue is that white privilege makes people uncomfortable to talk about the societal privilege that they have.
Well, to me, what I say on campuses all the time is if you want to cite instances of racism that we can all find and fight together, that's something that I'm more than willing to stand next to you and fight, because that's obviously stuff that we should fight together. But when you just say that there is a white privilege out there in the ether and that by dint of birth your skin color generates for you an advantage, what you're really saying to people is that your view is less valuable because you have not experienced what I've experienced. And that is an identity argument, that's a character argument, that's not a rational political argument that can actually be taken on in any way. It's more of a cudgel and a club than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm also interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her and fight for her?
As I say, I would. This is the first time I'm hearing about it, honestly. But
really,
yeah. But from hearing about it, maybe because it's local. I mean, I'm from LA. But in any case, I'm more than happy to stand alongside her and fight whatever group was responsible for this. Not only more than happy. I mean, you're talking about the alt-right. Again, I was the #1 target of anti-Semitic harassment from the alt-right last year.
Thank you.
I'm more than happy to do all that. And I think there's one more distinction that has to be made. When we talk about cases like Taylor's, they're horrific, and the administration is siding with Taylor. Okay, the administration is doing the right thing by Taylor, or trying to do the right thing by Taylor, as they should be. And I think that we need to make a distinction between cases where the administration is actively participating in the suppression of speech and cases in which the administration is trying to do the right thing in order to punish people for application of crime.
Thank you for joining us today. I think it is important that you're here as one of the leading conservative voices in the country. And the country has, in the last couple weeks, talked a lot about and Googled Project 2025. It's one of the most Googled search terms right now. And you're not going to get any censorship from me. So I just wanted to know, from your perspective, I think it would help us understand, on just like a scale of 0 to 100%, how much do you support Project 2025?
I think, like President Trump, I haven't looked all that deeply at Project 2025, but it seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
And so, well, let's just talk about pieces of it, and I guess you can tell me if you support it. You probably want less bureaucracy, right?
I do.
I want less bureaucracy. You want more efficiency?
I do.
I want more efficiency. You want taxpayer money spent wisely?
I do. Congrats on becoming a Republican.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents would be proud. Mass deportations, it calls for that. Do you support that part?
I support the deportation of any illegal immigrant who's in the United States who is not of benefit to the generalized American public.
So if they're picking agriculture that puts food on the tables of everyday Americans, they've never committed a crime inside the United States, they didn't come across with documents, should they be deported?
If they have not paid taxes and if their draw on the taxpayer benefits are larger than the contribution they are making to the economy, or if they're involved in criminal activity, they should be deported.
How do we measure that?
The same way that the IRS measures my income every year. It seems like if the IRS can track down every aspect of every receipt that I've ever submitted, and
So
they can do so for hundreds of millions of other Americans, they can do that for illegal immigrants as well, except for the fact that no one knows how many are in the country thanks to this administration.
So you would be cool with creating a system where they could pay those taxes if they wanted to and then stay and work and put food on our table?
It depends on how long it would take for them to pay the taxes, and they would also have to go presumably to the back of the line, although I'm not sure why I'm testifying about immigration policy at this point.
How about banning the abortion pill? That's part of Project 2025. Do you support that part?
I think that that's a state-by-state issue on a personal level. I'm
just asking you.
Sure, I'm a fully pro-life person, which means that I'm not in favor of the distribution of the abortion pill.
Banning same-sex marriage, what about that part?
I am in favor of traditional marriage between a man and a woman, and I am perfectly fine with anyone having any sort of voluntary sexual arrangement they seek. That's a different thing from whether the government should attach benefits to that personal relationship.
But you think it's a sin to have same-sex marriage?
I mean, I'm confused. Are you asking me as a religious Jew what I think about biblically?
I'm just asking, is it a sin to be gay?
Is it a sin to be gay? I mean, how long do we have here? 2 minutes? I mean, if the basic idea is that sexual orientation is up for government regulation, I'm not in favor of the government regulating the private consenting sexual activity of adults. That is a different thing, once again, from whether the government ought to engage in actual benefits for particular sexual arrangements that adults make.
But again, just you to me, is it a sin or not?
From a religious Jewish perspective, orientation is not a sin, but activity is. That's also the same perspective of most major religions, so far as I'm aware.
Okay. And how about cutting Social Security? Do you support that part of 2025?
I'm not sure what Project 2025's position on Social Security is. I'm in favor of the restructuring of Social Security along the lines of privatization and lowering and increasing the retirement age, because you, as well as every other congressperson, knows Social Security is going to go bankrupt, and yet everyone seems to have an interest in lying about it for the next decade and a half until we have to take austerity measures or radically increase inflation or taxes.
And bans against books about slavery. Do you support that part about?
Why would I possibly be in favor of bans about books about slavery? That would be absolutely ridiculous. What I am in favor of is the idea that school libraries should be able to make decisions along the lines of what exactly is appropriate for, say, a seventh grader and whether they ought to be treated to cartoons and genderqueer. That's not quite the same thing.
And just because we found some receipts, you did say, I think homosexual activity is a sin.
Yes, I'm a religious Jew, that's true.
There's a genetic component.
You found me out.
Orientation. But the view of all religious people I know has always been that sexual behavior is something that is up to you. And you said, I may have a desire to sleep with many women, but I do not.
I agree with me. Yes, that's true.
Rewritten. That ending expression said everything. Let's start with the first exchange. One of the members opens with a familiar playbook, an introduction straight out of Critical Race Theory 101. Academic definitions, sociological framing, and a lecture-style explanation of what white privilege supposedly means. The message is carefully packaged. This isn't about silencing you. It's just about acknowledging that your skin color gives you an advantage. Ben Shapiro's response is precise and devastatingly simple. He calls it what it actually is, a cudgel, a rhetorical weapon designed to dismiss arguments before they're even made. Strip away the academic language, and the message becomes clear. Your opinion matters less because of who you are. Then comes the emotional pivot, the reference to a high-profile tragedy used not to advance understanding, but to force a moral confession. The unspoken question hanging in the air is, are you a good person? Instead of taking the bait, Shapiro reframes the entire moment. He reminds the room that just 1 year prior, he was the single most targeted individual by the alt-right in the country. Not in theory, not in abstraction, in reality. Threats, harassment, and open anti-Semitism. That revelation changes the temperature instantly. The narrative they were building collapses. The caricature they wanted doesn't exist. What they're left with is someone who has personally faced real hatred and refuses to be lectured by people using academic abstractions as moral leverage. Then we get to the second exchange. This is where the hearing shifts from ideological framing to pure political theater. The attempt is to elevate Project 2025 into a looming authoritarian threat. It's delivered with dramatic flair, rapid pacing, and the hope that speed will substitute for substance. It doesn't. Shapiro dismisses it with a single line, exposing just how desperate the argument actually is. The laughter in the room tells you everything you need to know. The moment is gone, and it isn't coming back. Next comes the rapid-fire questioning, a classic tactic designed to trap someone into agreeing with vague principles like efficiency and accountability, then weaponize those answers later. But instead of falling into the trap, Shapiro flips it effortlessly. His response reframes the entire exchange and highlights how hollow the points really are. And then comes the final attempt, pulling out a quote about religious belief, framed as if it's the smoking gun. The expectation is outrage, backpedaling, clarification, apology. None of that happens. Shapiro owns it. No hedging, no evasive language, no attempt to dilute his beliefs for political comfort. Just clarity and confidence. By the time the clock runs out, the contrast couldn't be clearer. One side came armed with buzzwords, theatrics, and pre-planned outrage. The other came prepared, direct, and unapologetic. There's an old saying that applies perfectly here. When you're in a hole, stop digging. By the end of this hearing, that advice came far too late. Now I want to hear from you. Was this too aggressive? Or was it exactly what happens when identity politics collides with someone who refuses to play along? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're tired of political theater masquerading as serious debate, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.